G'day everybody and welcome to my Aussie gardening kitchen. If it's your first time here, my name's Darren, but please call me Daz. And in today's video, we're just going to look at gardening in hot weather. Now, the reason I've done this video is that we've just celebrated Christmas here. Now, people normally think of Christmas as, the images of a beautiful white Christmas with snow and stuff like that. And it is like that in some places, and I wish it was like that here, but it's not. Here in Australia, in the Southern Hemisphere, it's quite hot, and quite often it's weather for going to the beach and getting out into the yard, and then sometimes it's just too hot to get into the yard, like it is at the moment. Over the last week, we've been getting temperatures in the high 30s, which is getting around the 100 Fahrenheit mark, and in fact this week coming, I'm looking at high 30s and low 40s, which is around the 100 to 110 Fahrenheit mark. And I really need to be prepared because some of my vegetables and my fruit are going to cop a pounding from that harsh Australian sun. So we just celebrated Christmas 3 days ago here. And with the lead up to Christmas, I really did start to neglect the garden. I was just too busy with other things and just not thinking properly about what's going on outside. And also, as I was saying, with the really hot weather we've been having, things have not gone too well for some of my plants. In particular, my oranges and a mandarin and a plum. Now, they're not completely gone and some of them are okay, but I've really had to jump into survival mode here and get these plants sorted out with the sun. So I'll just take you along and show you what I've done here. So the first thing I did was I've got a system in place with my orchard where I've got a massive sheet of shade cloth. Now what I do is during the season when I don't need it, I have it actually folded up and tied to the side of the orchard. I've got netting over my orchard 100% of the time. So it's quite easy to store the shade cloth against the side of the orchard and just untie it and pull it over the top when I'm going to need it. And that's what I've just done. Now with the help of a couple of family members, I've gotten out here into the orchard and I've untied it all and I've pulled it up over the top of the orchard and I've secured it with cable ties along the edge. And now what's going to happen is I'm pretty much set for the rest of the season where I've only got half of it shaded. So the plan with the shade cloth in my orchard is that it only goes halfway over. It doesn't completely cover. Now the reason for that is I've got one half completely exposed to the sun. So when the sun comes up in the morning and rises, all the plants in there, all the trees are going to get that beautiful sun from the morning until about midday. And then as it's up above and then moves across the sky into the evening and gets lower, that shade cloth is going to then protect all the plants and all the fruit from that harsh Australian sun, which can really damage the fruit. It'll sunburn the fruit and the foliage on the trees will start to burn. And in fact, I'll show you one of my plums where it's just not like the sun at all. Now this plum here is not doing too well at all. Unfortunately, I was not thinking about it and I was not checking it properly. And over the last week or so, I've just neglected it, especially with this lead up to Christmas. And I've come out and looked at it the other day and oh my gosh, it's starting to wither and leaves are changing color. And that's just the stress from the sun. As you can see with all the other plants, they get watered and fed quite well. But this section here, where this plant is, it just gets so much sun that it just can't cope. So hopefully now that I've covered it, it'll do well and it'll recover. And hopefully it'll be good times ahead for this poor little guy in the corner. I've got 3 oranges and a mandarin tree. Now, they're doing okay, but they've really started to discolor. And in fact, one's been losing leaves and stressing right out because of the really bad heat that we've had in the last week or so. And it really was time for me to get myself organized and do something because they're just not going to cope. They're too young to be out in this exposed sun. And I really should have planned this better. I knew this was coming, but I just put it off and now I'm paying for it. As you can see, what I've done is I've cut some shade cloth into 3, I guess, almost squares, maybe rectangles. And then I've got these little fasteners. Now, they're a plastic, supposedly UV rated clip. And you can clip them and use a pair of pliers to squeeze them tight. And the teeth will sink into the little slots, little holes, I guess. Then that secures onto the shade cloth. And then what I've done here is I've just threaded that through some of the rope that I've got on the side of the orchard. And then also I've put some stakes into the ground at the front and I've run some rope along there. And now hopefully by securing that shade cloth to the back and the front, I've now got a shade system happening where I'm protecting the trees from the sun, the very harsh Aussie sun. So even my tomatoes, I've had to come out with a bit of shade cloth and cover my tomatoes because the extreme heat is just way too much for them. And I really don't want my tomatoes cooking on the vine. If I'm going to cook them, I'd rather wait until they're ripe and inside, and I'll do the cooking in my terms, thanks. Now with the mandarin, that's in a pot, and one of the beautiful things about growing fruit trees in pots is they're mobile, and that's exactly what I'm taking advantage of. So what I've done is I've removed the mandarin and the pot, the whole thing together, and I've taken it from that direct sunlight and I've pushed it over to the other side of the yard, and I've got it dropped down behind a mulberry tree. Now what's going to happen there is similar to the orchard. I'll be getting the sun coming across in the morning and probably till say midday up above. But then as the sun progresses across the sky, the mulberry tree on the other side of the wire fence I've got here is going to shade that young mandarin, and it's going to have the sun as well as the shade. Now, while I'm talking about plants in containers, if you are going to have containers out in the full sun, especially small trees, I really do recommend that you somehow protect the container from the direct sun, because what's going to happen is the sun's going to beat down onto that pot or container, and the root balls is going to get really hot inside that container, and it's not going to do well. So if you can, maybe make a wooden box to go around the outside of it, or set up some sort of system of other pot plants stacked all around it to try and shade it more and for them to absorb more of the heat and the light rather than the sides of the container or the pot that you use. Now, watering is something you really do need to consider. You need to water on a regular basis, and in my case, I like to water in the morning. Now, the reason for that is I like to give everything a really good soak, and then during the day, when it's going to possibly stress out from the heat, the tree or the plant, whatever it is, can work with that moisture in the soil and not be stressed out. Now, you don't want stressed out plants because they're not going to produce good fruit, because they're too busy about trying to survive and not really thinking about giving you a nice lush orange or a peach or something like that. Now, you can water in the evening, but I try to avoid watering in evenings, mainly because I want to avoid issues with mildew and molds. Now, things like, say, pumpkins and tomatoes and raspberries, if I'm going to get the foliage wet in the evening, there's a chance that overnight it's going to stay damp, and possibly you're going to get, say, a powdery mildew on the pumpkins or the tomatoes, or some sort of fungal issue or mold or anything like that with, say, the raspberries. So that's why I tend to water in the morning and try and keep it that way, just to avoid that wet foliage in the evenings. Now, mulch. I'm sure you've all heard people talk about mulching. It really is important. It's obviously going to keep the weeds and the grass down, which is great, because that way your plant, whatever it will be, has only got itself to worry about, and it's not competing with weeds and grass for nutrition and moisture and stuff like that. And speaking of moisture, you want to make sure that you mulch, because the mulch is going to keep the moisture down there. So when the sun's beating down at the base of the plant, you've got that nice thick layer of mulch there to protect that moisture that's down below in the soil. And it's given the plant a good chance of taking its time to use that nice wet soil down below, rather than having it be all dried out quickly by the hot sun. Now, in my case, I free range chickens in my yard, and I've actually got a couple of chickens that live in a coop that enters in and out of the orchard. So what I've done is I've put chicken wire over the top of the mulch at the base of my fruit trees, and that just holds down the mulch and stops the chickens from scratching it all away and getting into the roots. Because in the past, without any chicken wire, they get in there and they dig and they make a real mess, and you can see all the exposed roots and stuff like that. So yeah, I do recommend, if you're free ranging chickens in your yard, get a bit of chicken wire on top of your mulch and you should be good to go. They can still, if they really want to, get their beaks down in through the wire and peck at bugs and maybe a bit of grass that pops up, but they can't get the claws in there and scratch away and do any damage or remove that beautiful mulch that you've been working hard to keep on your plants. I hope you found some of this helpful, and I really do appreciate it. 2 videos about to pop up on the bottom of the screen here. Please click on at least one of them and check that out. It does help my channel when YouTube sees that people are watching my videos. Thanks very much, and I'll see you next time. Bye.